From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis with another program. Today, we are going to talk about something we talk about all the time on this show, schools. CPS, what's going on with education here in Chicago, but from a little bit of a different perspective, because 25 years ago, Catalyst was born, and the, I guess we could say the Earth Mother who birthed Catalyst is right here with us today. Linda Lenz has been on the show with us before, but Linda, it is so interesting to see that you have stewarded Catalyst for 25 years, and you're going to let it go out on its own now. You're retiring from Catalyst.
Yes, I intend to do that. You know, it has to come sometime, and this is our 25th anniversary, so it just sort of seemed right. I think Catalyst needs new leadership, someone who grew up with the digital world. I'm still struggling to catch up with the digital world, having been around for a long time. Yeah. So, you know, I'm excited about it for the future of the publication, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do.
Yeah, well, that's it, and that's, hey, we're all, so many of us are in that boat.
Yeah, right, baby boomers.
Yeah, all of us baby boomers. It's like, will you please just get out of the way so that we can do this properly.
I'm ready to get out of the way.
Interestingly, before Catalyst, you spent some time with the Sun-Times. You were the Sun-Times education reporter. That's how we met, way before that, 25 years ago. So you have what I consider to be one of the most valuable sort of personal archives of CPS inside your head. And I was just really happy, just honored to have you here today, because the whole idea is to sort of get a little bit of an exit interview out of you if we possibly can to talk about things. And I want to jump all over the place today because there are so many topics to talk about, but let's start at the very biggest picture of all. From someone who's got, you know, at least 30 good years of...
I know what's coming, but keep going.
Well, we hear from the people at CPS today that CPS is a better place than it was. The graduation rates are up, the dropout rates are down. Certainly tests, those constant tests are showing that kids are doing better than they were. So are kids in the CPS today doing better than they were doing 20 years ago in 1995?
Some kids are, and that continues to be the issue. Schools serve well some kids. Other kids aren't served well for a whole variety of reasons. They tend to be the most disadvantaged. And if you look at what Chicago Public Schools have done, it's been an awful lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So one thing that's been frustrating for me in covering this is just seeing how decisions have been made without regard to research, solid research, or how schools work, that there are a whole bunch of people, so you have to pay attention to things like process and how they field. So I must admit that colors my view a bit about this question on whether they're better or not.
I've mentioned before in the show that I was at Stowe Elementary in the 50s, in the late 50s, and it was a horrible place. It was an awful place. It was Dickensian. It was gang infested. It was awful. And I have been back since and found it to be a much, much better place than it was. Not only just the physical environment, but the academic environment. I mean, it's night and day from where it was in 1957 or so. So I think we can probably say, just from those kinds of experiences, that we're better off than we were 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, and probably better off than 30 years ago. Yeah, I mean, the physical plant matters. You mentioned that, and that's one thing where here you can credit Gary Chico, who was appointed school board president by Mayor Daley right after the '95 legislation. And they really invested in upgrading the physical plant, and they had the money to do it. I mean, one of the challenges today...
They had money in those days as well. Well, they had it because they were taking it away from the pension funds,
actually,
but
that was part of the bailout, as it were, in 1995, was some pension money moved over into general operations.
Right. So when we do the pension shows, it's always kind of interesting to talk about, well, that's one of the places where that money went. Good or bad, that's what happened. But The thing that I'm really just curious about is looking at this long haul over the last 25, 30 years, because Harold Washington
Yes.
really was the one who kind of got the ball started. He said that we just have to do something about this. And his philosophy was, let's decentralize the schools. Let's move some of the power out into the schools.
Yeah, one sage once said that the definition of reform is what you don't have right now. And what you had back then, right now, was a calcified school system where outsiders couldn't get in, nonprofit organizations, parents. And so, you pushed for the decentralization of the school system, and there's some evidence, hard research to show that served to improve a lot of schools, as much as a
School
third
system was like Ma Bell. It was just kind of like this big impenetrable monopoly, and a couple of people made all the decisions.
And schools that had good leadership really moved ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, the big thing that came out of that was the concept of the local school council, right? So every school got a council, or was
Elected
empowered.
council, right? Parents, yeah. And I mean, I think there are unrealistic expectations about what councils would do. I think people expected them to change schools overnight. They expected test scores to go up. And so, a little bit later, we got into 1995 when unfettered authority of the mayor to appoint school board members was resumed. I mean, one of my sort of pet peeves is that people think that somewhere in the past there was an elected school board. There has never been an elected school board. We have this fabulous timeline of the Chicago Public Schools on our website that goes back to like 18, 20, 30 something, where it says the mayor was given the authority to appoint the school board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's again, there are just these kind of myths that hang out there, that it's time to get back to an elected school board. Well, okay, that would take us back to 1833 or something.
There never was one.
The boys sitting around in the bar in 1833.
I want to add one thing here.
Yeah.
Local school councils is one of the few things that have persisted throughout. They are still here. They're not in all the schools because you just can't get enough parents for some of them, but they're plugging away, and you can see evidence that they really do help.
And they still have the authority to appoint principals, at least in theory, right?
Right. I mean, if your school is on probation and now they change the term to something else, then the central office can take on that authority. My sense is that in schools that are really struggling and are on probation, or whatever the word is today, that there's some supervision from like the network chief and so on, but there is local input into picking schools, even those that are really struggling. And
so do you have any sense of whether this grand experiment in democracy at the grassroots level benefited us all? Are we better off that we went that way, and whenever that was in the 80s?
Yeah, well, I mean, this has been a process where one thing, leads to another. So that did open up the school system. It made it possible for, forum organizations, nonprofit organizations to come in and do work. And we do have the research from the Consortium of Chicago School Research that, a goodly number of schools moved forward. So I think it was part of the 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah. But then, of course, as you say, there are these 2 major moments: the creation of the LSCs, and then the mayoral control,
Right.
which I remember very well being at the press conferences with Mayor Daley saying, everybody thinks I'm crazy for doing this. Everybody's saying, why would you want to take that on? Well, I want to take it on. I want to make them better. And then what we see is this kind of autocracy that begins to just kind of layer itself over everything. So in a way, it's not exactly going back to the future, but it's creating a kind of a different version of that autocratic school system.
Yes.
I mean, that's an opinion, I suppose, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, folks like mayors, they want to move quickly. They don't want to deal with a messy, sometimes drawn out process. of moving schools forward. And certainly Mayor Emanuel found out the folly of that.
Yeah.
And when he first got into office and just rushed in to do these reforms that everybody wanted, and I presume he thought everybody would applaud them, but he didn't pay attention to how it gets done.
It is interesting because you kind of get the feeling that he was thinking, oh, this is great. I'm a great organizer. I'm a great leader. I'm going to come in. I'm going to fix all this stuff. I don't know why they didn't fix this in the past. Give me 30 days. I mean, remember the big board that he had to check things off?
Yeah, I forgot about
fix the schools.
Right, yeah.
And it just turns out that, hey, it's a lot harder than that, I guess.
A lot more complicated.
But I mean, I'm thinking about, like, during mayoral control, the funding issues for the school actually got worse. If you look back from the beginning of mayoral control to today, right? I mean, the schools are worse off in terms of funding than they were. I'm not saying that they're connected, but I'm saying that was something that wasn't fixed.
Yeah, well, yes, that's true. I mean, the 95 legislation, returning unfettered control to the mayor, made a lot of changes that enabled the school board to put its hands on more money, things that had, the accountants had put in the don't touch category and some of the pension money and stuff like that. So, Gary Chico, Paul Vallis, they were able to start the re-centralization, which you would expect a lot of people to protest about, with getting rid of red ink in the budget, 4-year teacher's contract, new programs. They came out with that at the beginning, and it just sort of shut everybody up because there was something there for everyone.
Interesting.
Yeah. But also the economy was different.
Yeah.
But there was no new money that came. They just kind of freed stuff up. And the economy has, made the difference.
This is something I hadn't even thought about talking about on the show today, but it just reminded me of it. And I want us to both wade into this because this is incredibly controversial, and you'll be reviled for no matter what you say on this. But I've never been able to get my fingers on the role that specifically the CTU played during those years when the money was flowing like crazy, and the Chico and Vallis and Daley said, we don't need to put so much money into the pensions. Let's take this money and improve some schools with it, and let's kick some money back to the teachers and give you a little bit more of a raise than you might have had otherwise. The CTU, I think, pretty clearly says that they opposed that, but what's your recollection of that? Wasn't everybody at the party?
Yeah, everybody was at the party. If they opposed it, they did it behind closed doors and very quietly. No, that makes no sense. I mean, in theory, they object to that. But at that time, actually, I think it was like $65 million that was shifted over from, pension taxes to general operating. And the system could sort of afford it at that time because the pension fund was much more...
It was like almost 100%.
Yeah, it was huge. But, then, with the economy going south, it... couldn't afford that, and it's sort of a fie on all of us for not having caught that. We journalists
I think that's
closer
right.
attention.
It's easy to just say, well, the union went for the ride, but also journalism went along with the ride too.
What we didn't pay attention to is when it just became almost untenable financially.
Right.
The projections into the future.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm having a really hard time struggling with this because when you look back over the last 20 years, and from the time of the Edgar ramp and all the stuff that we've been talking about, what seems to me was happening was every single year, and we've talked a lot with George Schmidt about this, and I really respect George Schmidt's view on this, that every single year there's $1 billion deficit, and every single year it gets erased the night before with some money that nobody knows where it came from, but suddenly it's all okay, and then we don't have to worry about it again for another year. But in the background, what's really happening is that this deficit is just growing and growing and growing, and nobody's really noticing it because we're just not concerned about it for some reason.
Yeah, well, that's, I think, because of the crying wolf thing. And I don't know those numbers well enough to know whether, CPS was acting responsibly or not in this regard. They may have been.
But I mean, I guess the point that I'm trying to get at is that everything is history, and when we see the mess that we're in today, we can look back more than 20 years, 25 years to see where these seeds were sown, and somewhere along the line, we just let those weeds grow, and anyway, it's.
I mean, the only thing you can argue, and this is probably fairy tale here, but you can argue that they took that money and created the crisis, where they took the money to say, here's what should be going into schools and for teachers and so on, and you create the crisis until somebody comes in and fixes it, but it's not getting fixed. I can't tell you the number of years where I said, this is so bad, surely they're going to fix it this year, and they never do.
Because it's hard, and it would require...
Well, it means more taxes, which is so infuriating, because this is, in many ways, a low-tax state. I mean, come on, our income tax just isn't that high.
Yeah.
But there's no leadership there.
We have to talk about what I'm pretty sure I think is the biggest issue of our time in the schools, and it's not the finances, it's no longer creeping, the rampant privatization of the school system. Linda Lenz did a story the other day. I mean, you guys have done it too. Obviously, you've covered this extensively in Catalyst. But I just happened to catch a little bit of her thing online. The Noble network of charter schools, which already runs, and these numbers are staggering to me. 16 schools in Chicago. They have 10% of all city high school students right now. They're educating 10% of our high school students. And Noble is now, they got this big grant from Arnie Duncan. They got $8 million so that they can build more schools. And they're talking about 6,000 more students, or 15% in the next couple of years. Now, just one more thing, which I just thought was really interesting, and this is, again, you guys and WBEZ worked on this story together, but several Chicago high schools this year have freshman classes of just 20, 25, or 30 kids. You think of these giant buildings, these wonderful old buildings. That's the entire freshman class, 25 kids. There are more than 24 district-run high schools, including Fenger, Harper, Hirsch, Manley, Richards, Robinson, and Tilden, with fewer than 400 students in the whole building, rattling around in this building, and a half a dozen of them have 200 students. Now, that's not because the enrollment has dropped that much. I mean, Wendy Catton says it's down. It's dropped from 404 to 396. It's dropped, but that's not what's responsible for this.
Right. Well, more students are going into charter schools. I mean, for sure. There are some publicly run schools, International Baccalaureate and so on, that are attracting kids. I mean, we're clearly having more of a system of choice. It's mainly charter schools, but it also includes some publicly run schools.
But something just feels completely out of balance about this. I mean, it just feels, I don't want to get nostalgic about the traditional high schools. I mean, they were not very good for a long time.
Right.
Many of them, I think, have been getting better. But it just bugs me to think that we're turning so much of this over to the private sector, and, by the way, paying for it. I mean, when $8 million comes to Noble and they build these new campuses, that $8 million is gone like that, and we're paying for it because we have to take money out of the traditional schools to give to the charters so that they can compete with the traditional schools.
They're getting, per pupils, they're getting roughly the same. But and since we're doing it on budgeting schools on pupil basis, if there are fewer kids, there's going to be less money. And you can say, well, you don't need as much money because you have fewer kids, but there comes a point when you can't offer all the things you want to, particularly in high schools, when you have so few kids. I mean, the frustrating thing for me is that I see no plan. I mean, the idea of charter school, I mean, Noble Street has had some great successes. Now, also back to BEZ, where they did this data analysis, and the kids who go into the charter schools in the Noble Streets tend to be better prepared than the kids who go into the neighborhood schools, which have become
when they walk in the
schools
door.
of last resort.
Right.
But, you can argue that they've been successful. But the idea of charter schools is that you're supposed to, one of several things, save money, well, you haven't saved money, come up with innovations and spread them, haven't seen that much, and then sort of prompt, competition that would make the other schools better. Well, none of those things have happened. And so I'm frustrated that there is no plan. And what do you do about the kids who are left to the schools of last resort, these huge buildings?
It's just, there's something that is just so reprehensible about this, where those trend lines just continue, and these older traditional buildings are going to be, as you said, just the sort of I hate to use these terms, but just these kind of dumping grounds for the kids who just have less resources than the others.
And then, you know, they've started these schools for kids who have dropped out when you come back in, and it's online, and they basically put in very little time. There's very little teacher interaction. I mean, that's verging on being a sham. So.
Right. Well, I mean, it just so happens that our new studios here at Can TV, we're right on the corner where Montefiore, we're right next door to Montefiore. And you know, that place is supposedly legally open, although they have no staff. And now it's been turned over to a bunch of private operators, and there's a whole bunch of kids in there who are working in
these.
There's
just seeing no thought process out there.
It's everything is very kind of ad hoc. And yes, I'm sure it's true that charters had something to offer early on. They had lessons to learn or to teach us maybe, but we haven't, as you said, we haven't seen that. And I just, so the question, I mean, I actually wrote the question down, Linda, because I wanted to make sure that I asked you the question right. Are we on the path to the total privatization of Chicago's high schools?
I don't think so.
No.
This city is so politically well organized, grassroots organizations who oppose the charter schools, and they now have gotten to the aldermen who oppose the charter schools. Certainly the Chicago Teachers Union, which has shown its organizing power, opposes them. So I just think the politics run against it becoming, the total privatization. Now, there are very wealthy people who, our mayor plays around with, they're coming in to support these schools, but while they have money and they have money for a campaign, ultimately they don't have that many votes.
Well, I think the Noble defines their supporters as deep networks of high wealth individuals.
I know, it's
kind of like American politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, there's a million things that we can talk about on this, but I do think, though, that we are in this interesting situation, which you've already brought up, where you have, was it 45 or 46 aldermen opposing more charter schools? Now, again, as I don't mean to be offensive to you, but as older people, as boomer journalists, when was the last time you saw 45 aldermen standing up against the mayor on something?
Yeah, now, I mean, if this can be translated into really serious attempts to improve the public schools, the neighborhood schools, I don't know, could this be a tipping point? Haven't seen evidence of that coming out of central office yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I of course.
I mean, tipping point to actually try to improve public neighborhood schools.
I know. Yeah. Of course, this is not a Chicago story. What we're talking about here is a very much national story with, the Waltons and all the rich people in America who think they know more about education than all the professionals who've been around for the last 100 years doing it. And it's like, oh, we've got a simple solution to this. Just let us come in there and we'll fix it. We'll build new schools and we'll fix it. I'm getting a little tired of being pushed around by billionaires, to tell you the truth. But that's the way I see it. Is it too early to assess Rahm Emanuel as an education mayor?
Well, I know you can assess him. As I said earlier, he started out so badly and just really, I mean, it was almost 2 steps back rather than 1 step back. And now, to try to be fair here, he doesn't have the money to do much stuff. So you've started some little programs here and there, which arguably are positive, not as positive as they are usually, put up to be. He's invested in early childhood education, but then there have been problems with the new system where you sign up for it, where parents have to travel to sign up, and so there aren't as many kids going. He has continued the investment, this is ironic, in principal preparation, coming in the wake of the soup scandal. I know, but that's hugely important. A principal makes or breaks the school, and Chicago has been, I think, in the lead in trying to improve the principal corps, and he's invested in that.
So, I mean, you're not completely down on him as an educator. You
Well,
think his heart's in the right place?
I'm trying. Well, yeah, I think so. I think he wants schools to be better. You know, I'm trying to be the journalist here.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. So were you blindsided by Barbara Byrd Bennett? I mean, did you see that coming?
No.
I don't think anybody did.
No. I mean, we had a Catalyst Cleveland for about 9 years, and during her tenure there, and she did some really good stuff in terms of teaching and learning. So I came out, you know, considering her a pretty good educator.
Yeah.
And we knew that, you know, she would have been criticized for taking first class travel, but it was with private money. And so you think, well, okay, fine. But that didn't go over well in the community. So that was the only inkling, but you wouldn't have guessed it would have gone to where it did.
There's something about it that is so blatant that it's really almost, if it weren't so tragic, it would be comical. That,
it's like, did she know what she was doing?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe she just heard that Chicago is the place where boodle is king, and all you got to do is just come in and just hold your hand out, and they just give it to you or something. Oh, I want 10%. It's like, no, even in Chicago, you don't ask for 10%.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's a very sad situation because, you know, I mean, it's just, and then you want to talk about your steps backward. That was 3 steps backward, losing that, and the momentum that has to be gained from that.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense? Quick final question: do you have a sense of Rahm Emanuel's longer school day? Does it exist? Did it ever exist?
Well, the time was added. How, you know, and I think it depends on the school as to how it was put to use. You know, early on, people said there was more passing time. They used it for that. Some have used it to increase instruction time. I'm going to guess that ended up being beneficial. I mean, do I have an account of what all, you know, 400, 500, 600 schools have done with it? No. But
that's part of why we need Catalyst, because the answer to all of these questions is it's complicated.
Yeah.
It
it
depends.
takes time to get the answers.
Right. And it takes research, and you put that together, and you have shepherded it for 25 years, and on behalf of Chicago, on behalf of this show, which has benefited so much from it, I thank you for that.
Thank you. And since we go way back, this is the very first copy of our 25th anniversary issue.
Cool. Look at that, right there.
Yeah.
It's warm. It's just it just came off the presses.
Come to our big party on Tuesday, and then you get
I'll
one
be
of
there.
those.
And that is next Tuesday, right?
Right, at the House of Blues. We're having a 25th anniversary celebration, which is also a fundraiser because, like all nonprofits, we need money.
We were just commenting before we went on the air about all of us are fundraisers now.
I know.
Everybody's
I used to be a journalist, now I'm a fundraiser.
That's right. You can do a little bit of journalism, but you got to do all the fundraising.
But I have a great
first.
Journalism staff. So.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why it's so important to have someone like you. And again, thanks for everything that you've done. See you Tuesday.
Great.
How can people get there?
You go to our website and you can register/pay tickets.
Good.
And it's going to be a fun event.
Good.
Not your standard, cheese cubes and, it's at the House of Blues, for goodness sake.
Barbara Byrd Bennett is she's funding it. That's why it's going to be. Oh, stop it.
Yes, stop it.
Linda, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Linda Lenz, the founder and barn boss of Catalyst all these years, and she's retiring, and we're glad she's done what she's done. We'll be back next week with another show here on CAN TV. This is Chicago Newsroom, and we'll see you next week with another program. Thanks very much for watching. You can see us anytime you want by just going to this address right here, and thank you very much.